We have to show strength, that we're willing to do whatever it takes to protect Canadian jobs. We have to also make sure it's very clear.
So Jagmeet, is showing strength continuing to back Justin Trudeau? Because that is far from strength. But we have some things to cover before we get into House of Commons and question period. Trudeau shares border plan with premiers in meeting on Trump tariff response. Everybody knows about the Trump tariff threat, the 25% tariff on all Canadian imports, and with Mexico as well, if we do not fix our borders. This threat has been made time and time again by Trump. As a matter of fact, I find it funny that people think it's shocking when he actually comes through with the things he says he's gonna do. For example, when a video from a few months ago started resurfacing and Trump said he was going to do all these things, these were the things that he ran on for the past year and a half. At every single one of his rallies, he said these things over and over again, whether it's the tariff on imports or sending people back home, illegals specifically. I just find it funny, right? When people are like, oh my God, he's actually doing the things he says. Yes, Trump is a man of his word. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau shared an overview of the federal government's plan to strengthen border security with Canada's premiers and discussed potential responses to tariffs threatened by U.S. President-elect Trump during a meeting Wednesday. Federal officials said Public Safety Minister Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer Dominic LeBlanc told reporters in Ottawa that the border plan was still being finalized. You had 10 years to create a border plan, but here we are last second doing it, and would incorporate suggestions from the premiers during the meeting, and the second one held since Trump's threat to impose 25% tariffs on Canadian imports. He said details would be shared with the incoming Trump administration and Canadians in the coming days. We shared details of the border plan with premiers and received positive feedback, he said following the meeting. We've heard this before. Trudeau claims he goes to these meetings and has positive feedback or a good conversation, or the conversations he had were fruitful. I find it kind of hard and difficult to believe this man after all of the lies and bullshit he perpetuates. It's just kind of pathetic at this point that anybody actually would believe him in the things he has to say. But here we are. Trudeau will have to kiss the ring to achieve smoother bilateral relations with Trump, claiming John Bolton. We're going to listen to a little bit of CTV news here.
You wrote in your book, The Room Where It Happened, I remember reading a few years ago, some descriptions of meetings that they had had, in particular at the G7, and the view of Donald Trump toward the Prime Minister. What was it like at that time? Do you think it was personal animosity, or it was more just about the issues and the sort of disagreement over tariffs, for example, at the time?
No, Trump doesn't care about issues. He cares about Donald Trump. And where I first saw the relationship in operation was at the G7 in Canada in 2018, where the other members of the G7 basically forced Trump into some statements in the outcome document that he didn't particularly like. I'd have to say I didn't like them either. But anyway, it was agreed. Trump got on a plane, Air Force One, because we were headed to Singapore for his first meeting with Kim Jong-un. And as we were flying over the Atlantic, I was sleeping, but Trump was up because he had heard that Prime Minister Trudeau had, in his view, insulted him in the last press conference at the close of the G7. And Trump, after he woke me up and some others, decided he was going to withdraw from the outcome document, which is unprecedented to say the least. But he was so outraged at what at that Trudeau press conference that that's what he did. So my take on the relationship is that I don't know what it was before I saw it in action at the G7, but afterward it was.
Look, the bottom line is nobody has any respect for Trudeau, whether it's Donald Trump or any international leader. They look at our country as an absolute joke. They look at Trudeau as a weak man. They look at him as a weak leader. Leaders, they don't shake his hand. Leaders, they do not pay attention to him. They don't even acknowledge him as somebody worth their time. I don't know how many times I need to bring up that G7 video where Trudeau is literally standing on the outside while everybody surrounds Trump. The exact same thing is going to happen in his second term. I can't stress it enough. Trudeau, nobody cares about him, whether it's Trump or any international leader. We have Jagmeet. Now, this is the news realistically nobody cares about. Nobody cares about what Jagmeet has to say anymore. Time and time again, he lies through his teeth, throwing Canadians under the bus for his own political gain, whether it's keeping his party intact or the $2.2 million pension, whatever it is, he is not for Canadians. If he was for Canadians, Trudeau would have been outed during the third non-confidence vote. But Jagmeet, still in the coalition, quite obviously still in the coalition, backs Trudeau for a third time. Now, sadly, I don't want to listen to Jagmeet, but we're going to listen to Jagmeet and the stupidity that he has to say.
I want to start off talking about tariffs. The threat of Donald Trump's tariffs, 25% across the board, is a direct threat to hundreds and thousands of Canadian jobs. Imagine what it feels like right now for a worker in a trade-sensitive sector who's wondering, will my job be the first to go when those tariffs are put in place? This is serious. That doesn't just mean that that worker loses their job, the entire family is impacted. So what is the response to these serious threats by the Prime Minister? The Prime Minister is telling us it's okay, oh, he's just joking, Donald Trump's just making jokes, no big deal. It is a big deal. On top of that, what we're seeing from Trudeau is that anytime Trump says jump, he says how high. That is not strength, that is not actually.
Whenever Trudeau tells you to jump, you say how high, because time and time again, you're in his pocket, backing him almost every step of the way, Jagmeet.
Actually responding to what's going on. And then, when Trump trash talks Canada, we got the leader of the Conservative Party repeating that garbage. That hurts Canada, that hurts Canadian workers. What we need to do is acknowledge that Trump is a bully. Bullies look for weakness. That's why he's trolling us. So we need to send a message of strength. We need to have a
He's trolling us because we are an absolute former shell of what Canada used to be. Trudeau, time and time again, has made that quite obvious and clear, from the policies he enacts to the things he says on world stages to simply just him in the House of Commons.
real war room ready to go, fighting for Canadian jobs with unions at the table.
Yes, Jagmeet is a bully himself. He likes to sit there calling out bullies while he is the #1 Canadian bully right now.
We need to put in place and get ready to put in place retaliatory tariffs. We have to make it clear, if Trump picks this fight, it's going to hurt both of us, and it's not a fight that he wants. We have to show strength, that we're willing to do whatever it takes to protect Canadian jobs. We have to also make sure it's very clear.
So Jagmeet is showing strength, continuing to back Justin Trudeau, because that is far from strength.
That tariffs on Canada don't just hurt Canadians, it's going to hurt Americans. We need to make that message very clear, make sure the pain is felt, and so he knows this is not the direction he wants to go. We have to defend Canadian jobs, and that's my commitment. Donc, avec les
All right, so I'm obviously going to skip over the French parts. We have some questions from reporters here as well, so we'll listen to those. Unless they're in French, we will not listen to them.
Holding conference news. First of all, Premiers Fury, Smith, Ford, and so on have been either on Fox News, on CNBC very soon, or going to the United States or holding conference calls with their governors to get the message out. First of all, do you approve of that? Do you like what's happening? And then I've got a second question.
Well, we certainly need to get our message out to the United States, but I've seen very mixed messages coming out from some of these Conservative premiers that are not making it clear that we need to defend Canadian jobs. I want to see a strong approach.
Jagmeet, you've made it unclear yourself whether you want to protect Canadian jobs, while you continue to back Trudeau. Every single thing this guy says, you could simply chalk it up to the fact that he continues to back and support Trudeau. It's that simple. Whenever he says he's for Canadians, Canadian jobs, Canadian healthcare, grocery stores, gas prices, you could simply chalk it up to the fact that he still supports Trudeau in every step of the way. He's a fucking liar. He's one of the biggest liars in Parliament. Jagmeet Singh specifically. Yes, Trudeau massive liar, lies through his teeth all the time. But Jagmeet, oh my god, man, he is second to none when it comes to lying.
Questions orales.
Alrighty.
Questions. The honor
About time.
for Regina Capel.
Prime Minister has lost control of spending and his cabinet, and the fiscal feud over the $40 billion guardrail is worse than we ever thought. New reports show that the Prime Minister is set to replace Canada's first female finance minister with his old boys network pal, carbon tax Carney. And Canadians are on the bus watching in terror as the Prime Minister is yanking her out of the driver's seat so that Carney can send us smashing through the guardrail and over the cliff. Does the Finance Minister still have her hands on the wheel, and will the deficit be below that $40 billion guardrail?
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Mr. Speaker, I'm delighted that the first question from the Conservatives relates to the economy and the Finance Minister. Let's talk about the work she's been doing on behalf of Canadians. Yesterday, we had a 50 basis point interest rate cut announced by the Bank of Canada. That was the 5th time in a row, leading the entire G7, we've seen the interest rates come down from the Bank of Canada. On Saturday, we have a further great news for details for Canadians, which is a GST tax cut on basic essentials for every Canadian from coast to coast to coast. That's groceries, that's things that you buy for your kids for Christmas. That's great news for Canadians under the leadership of this Finance Minister.
The Honourable Member for Regina Capel.
Even the bank admitted that they had to cut rates because the economy is performing so poorly under this NDP Liberal Prime Minister. And, you know, Canada's phantom finance minister has been pulling the strings for a while. Carbon tax Carney has been forcing radical new spending and forcing the finance minister to smash through a $40 billion guardrail. And now that Canadians are fed up and angry, the Prime Minister is going to blame her, dump her, and replace her with Carney. A classic example of an incompetent boss blaming subordinates. Does the Finance Minister not realize that she's about to join a long list of cabinet ministers that have had their careers and their reputations ruined by this Prime Minister?
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Mr. Speaker, I'm equally delighted that he's talking about the Bank of Canada, because what has the actual Bank of Canada governor said recently? He said, quote, CPI inflation has been about 2% since the summer, and we expect it to be close to target on average over the next couple of years. On inflation, what has Tiff Macklamachi said? Quote, we are no longer trying to get inflation down. Government spending is not pushing against us getting inflation down. We have brought it down. That's the handiwork of this finance minister and this government.
That's not something to be proud of. Only since the summer has this taken place. You've had 10 years. You've had 10 bloody years.
A little further, he'd read that it's not because of anything the government's been doing except causing our economy to slow down and underperform. That's why they've taken this step. But you know, a guardrail is something you're supposed to stay far away from. If you even brush up against it, it's a sign you're way off track. If you smash through it, you go flying off a cliff. Now, even Liberal MPs are terrified and are ringing the bell, trying to get off before they smash through the guardrail. One of them said, quote, I think that if we state that we have a $40 billion guardrail, we better stay within those numbers. And another is begging for a fiscally responsible framework. Will the Prime Minister allow a free vote, or will he force his Liberal MPs to stay on that bus as it goes up the cliff?
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Speaker, allow me to reference not just what the domestic Bank of Canada is talking about, but let's talk about what the IMF is stating. The IMF is projecting that Canada will have the strongest economic growth in the G7 on average in 2023 and 2024. Canada is expected to maintain its position as the country with the smallest deficit as a share of GDP among G7 countries, and still by far the lowest general government net debt as a share of GDP in the G7. What's up, Mr. Speaker? Canada's growth and leadership of the G7. That's what's up, and we're proud of it.
Actually, the Bank of Canada yesterday, we watched this. The guy claimed that we are performing worse than usual. Our quarter, every quarter, we have performed negatively, and only now are we seeing a slow increase. Emphasis on slow.
The Prime Minister, a fake feminist, by the way.
Varani might be one of the worst liars and one of the most frequent liars of the Liberals. He does it every time.
An elected man who is already pulling the strings behind the scenes. Order. The Honourable Minister for Innovation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We have no lessons to learn from the Conservatives, Mr. Speaker. With regards to the economy, Canadians have seen the work put forward by the Liberal government. A key interest rate at 3.25%, Mr. Speaker. A key interest rate that will help families, that will help SMEs, that will help our business people. Soon, there will be a GST vacation. It's Christmas time. I know the Conservatives. I'm sure they have a good heart. Let's celebrate Canadians and our entrepreneurs, and let us celebrate this reduction in the key interest rate. The Honourable Member for Bellechasse-Lévis. Mr. Speaker, now we've seen it all. An incompetent Prime Minister who is pushing his Finance Minister to run up a staggering $40 billion deficit. And now he's blaming her for his failure and is replacing her with an unelected man. And all the while, he struts around equal voice, claiming to be a proud feminist. What hypocrisy! Will the Prime Minister finally admit that his minister is a mere facade now, because he is forcing her to break her promise to respect the $40 billion deficit ceiling?